personal stuff. People don't want that. And there's a sense that this is what he cares about. This is what he's spending his time on. He's the guy who ran, I'm watching out for you. And it turns out all he cares about is building up himself, enriching himself, actually, but also denigrating his predecessors and his opponents.
There was a statement from the White House. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, says the plaques are eloquently written descriptions of each president and the legacy they left behind. As a student of history, many were written directly by the president himself. Look, every presidency has some controversy in it, unless, if you read these plaques, Donald Trump's, which is all laudatory. But I think it's worth saying that the Democratic presidents who are trashed on that wall got more than 300 million combined votes across 5 elections. People put them there. What else do you think it says about our current president, that this is something that he took the time to want to do?
Yeah, I think it's funny that Caroline Leavitt thinks it's a plus. Maybe she's just catering to Trump, who wants credit for these vulgar and kind of repulsive plaques. But, that Trump personally did it. In a way, the normal thing would be to say, well, some overeager staffer who wanted to build up the president and attack his opponents did it. But, it wasn't really the president's decision. They went the opposite way on this, obviously. But you're right. Look, I mean, these people won a majority. Obama and Biden won a majority of the vote, in the 3 most recent Democratic presidents to win. And Clinton won handy pluralities with Perot, preventing him from getting a majority. Trump won people who voted for Obama in 2016. Trump won people who voted for Biden in 2024, who voted for Biden in 2020. Otherwise, he wouldn't have won, right? By definition, if you're going to go from the minority party to the majority party, you need to win people who had voted for the other people. Do they really want to hear that the person they voted for, they might not think in retrospect he was as great as they hoped? Do they want to hear that he was worthless and want to see him denigrated? We have such a tradition in this country, and, for better or worse, but I think for better, of being pretty respectful of former presidents, right? I mean, you see the photos in the Oval Office, they get together, the living presidents, often at the beginning of the next president's term, people from both parties. There's a tradition for major occasions. People will come together, funerals and national tragedies, national celebrations, obviously. Trump's just thrown that all to the wind. Maybe in Trump's America, it doesn't matter. Maybe people like the kind of childish denigrating of your opponents and your predecessors. But I'm not sure that a majority of the American people are there.
Let me start this by saying something very clearly, because I think it gets lost in the noise of daily political chaos. The White House is not a personal trophy case. It's not a vanity project. It's not a place for petty score settling or historical revenge tours. It's the people's house. And what we're seeing right now, coming out of Trump's White House, tells you almost everything you need to know about how he sees power, history, and frankly, the country itself. Because now we're learning that President Trump has turned parts of the White House into what I can only describe as a personal insult gallery, a so-called walk of fame, where former presidents are publicly mocked, diminished, and humiliated on official-looking metal plaques, not by some edgy artist, not by protesters, but by the sitting president of the United States. And according to multiple reports, many of these nasty little jabs weren't even written by staffers trying to please him. Trump himself took the time to write them. By the way, I'm trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Joe Biden doesn't even get a photo, just a declaration that he was the worst president in American history. Barack Obama is reduced to a cheap label as one of the most divisive figures the country has ever known. And Bill Clinton's plaque ends not with anything about policy, peace deals, or economic growth, but with a smug reminder that Trump beat Clinton's wife in 2016. That's not history, that's a grudge list etched in metal. And what really struck me is that this isn't happening on Trump's private property. This isn't Mar-a-Lago. This isn't Trump Tower. This is the White House, which is why even Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, not exactly someone who rushes to cable news to attack Trump, said she was genuinely disturbed. She said, "This isn't Trump's house where he can just say whatever he wants. This is the people's house." And she's absolutely right. When you hear longtime conservatives, former White House officials, and even people who don't agree with Democrats at all saying this crosses a line, you should pay attention. Bill Kristol, who worked in both the Reagan and George H.W. Bush administrations, laid this out in a way that really resonated with me. because he's not speaking as a partisan flamethrower. He's speaking as someone who actually served inside that building and understands what it represents. He talked about how this isn't just about one tacky display, it's part of a pattern. The destruction of the East Wing to build a ballroom no one reviewed, no congressional discussion, no serious oversight, just, I want it, so I'm doing it. All the glittery, gaudy excess. And for a while, even people like Kristol admitted they thought, okay, I personally hate this, but maybe voters don't care. Maybe people are focused on grocery prices, rent, gas, the kitchen table stuff. But here's the thing, and this is important. People do care. Kristol said he's been struck by how many ordinary Americans are actually offended by this, not outraged in a Twitter way, offended in a deeper, quieter sense. Because there's still a shared understanding that the White House doesn't belong to one man. It belongs to all of us. And when a president uses it as a prop to boost himself and trash everyone who came before him, it signals something ugly about his priorities. This isn't renovation. This isn't redecorating the Oval Office to suit the next 4 years. That's normal. That's expected. This is personal pettiness turned into public architecture, and people see it as exactly that. What makes it even worse is the contrast between what Trump promised and what he's doing. He ran saying, I'm watching out for you. He sold himself as the champion of forgotten Americans. And yet here he is, spending time obsessing over plaques, insults, and how history will flatter him. Not fixing problems, not building coalitions, not governing, but polishing his ego and tearing down anyone who reminds him that he's not the center of American history. And then you get the official White House response, which honestly made me shake my head. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said these plaques are eloquently written descriptions of each president's legacy, and that as a student of history, Trump personally wrote many of them. Think about how upside down that statement is. As if the fact that Trump himself authored these insults is supposed to make it better. As if vulgarity becomes virtue when it's handwritten by the president. Every presidency has controversy, every single one. But let's inject some reality here. The Democratic presidents being trashed on that wall, Biden, Obama, Clinton, collectively received more than 300 million votes across 5 elections. The American people put them there. You don't have to like them. You don't have to agree with their policies. But pretending they're illegitimate or worthless isn't just disrespectful to them. It's disrespectful to the voters who chose them. And here's another truth that doesn't get said enough. Trump didn't win by only appealing to his base. He won by persuading people who had previously voted for Obama, people who voted for Biden. That's math. That's how elections work. So what message does this send to those voters? Thanks for supporting me. By the way, the person you voted for before was garbage and deserves to be mocked in the White House. Is that really how you unify a country? Is that how you expand a coalition? Or is it just how you nurse old grudges? We've always had a tradition in this country, imperfect but meaningful, of respecting former presidents. You see it in the photos in the Oval Office. You see it when living presidents from both parties show up together at inaugurations, funerals, national tragedies, and moments of celebration. It's not about pretending everyone was perfect. It's about acknowledging that they all served, that they were chosen by the public, and that the office itself deserves dignity. Trump has thrown that tradition out the window. Completely. Maybe he thinks Americans want childish insults and permanent grievance. Maybe he thinks politics is WWE-style trash talk forever. But I'm not convinced most Americans are there, and I don't think this lands the way he thinks it does. There was also a moment in that conversation that really hit home for me personally. The host asked Kristol to expand on something important, the feeling of being inside the White House. And I want to pause on this because it matters. I've never worked there the way Kristol did, but I've spoken to enough people who have from multiple administrations, and they all say the same thing. No matter your politics, when you walk into that building, you feel it. The history, the weight, the sense that this is the center of global power, but also the center of a fragile democratic experiment that's been going on for centuries. Kristol explained it perfectly. It's not about luxury. The offices are actually pretty modest. It's about privilege. You know you're there temporarily. You know you're replaceable. You know you're serving something bigger than yourself. And that awareness creates restraint, or at least it used to. He talked about Ronald Reagan never taking off his coat and tie in the Oval Office. Not because anyone forced him to, because he respected the room. People would put on jackets just to step inside. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. That sense that you don't treat this place casually. And no, this isn't a royal court. It's not Versailles. It's not a palace for a king. It's a temporary workplace entrusted to leaders by the American public. And that's exactly why what Trump is doing feels so wrong to so many people. He's acting like it's his personal estate, not a shared institution. This is what happens when politics becomes entirely about ego, when history becomes a weapon, when public space becomes private branding, and when grievance replaces governance. You can defend Trump's policies. You can argue about taxes, immigration, foreign policy, judges. That's politics. But when a president starts using the White House to publicly humiliate his predecessors, that's not strength. That's insecurity carved into metal. And the saddest part, none of this helps regular people. It doesn't lower prices. It doesn't make communities safer. It doesn't heal divisions. It just deepens them. And it tells you exactly where this president's attention really is. Not on us, on himself.